Hello everybody, I'm Mike from the Rewatch Project and I am a lifelong Star Trek fan watching classic Doctor Who for the first time, and I've reached the third episode of the Marco Polo serial, namely the episode 500 Eyes. I am forced to watch the reconstructions of these episodes that some industrious fan in, I believe, the early 2000s, I want to say, made because these episodes were lost. So this is a little bit of a interesting experiment in in reacting to a TV show. But so far, it's actually been a pretty good experience. I'm sort of a combination of regretful of the fact that clearly this was a very well-made episode of television. So the fact that I'm only really getting to see glimpses of it is a little bit frustrating, but it's still surprisingly watchable, and it keeps the completist in me happy to know that I'm watching all of these. So going to hit play in a moment. Just want to also quickly remind you to please leave comments on the YouTube page, and there's been some really interesting stuff in there. I have not seen these before. I know very little about Doctor Who, so it's been a great learning experience for me. So let's go in and see what this third part of the Marco Polo serial is all about. This must have been really exciting when these fan reconstructions came out. I mean, I'm assuming that the audio was available beforehand, but being able to sit down and actually kind of watch these episodes, particularly for that first generation of fans, or maybe people who came to the show a little bit later and never had the opportunity to watch these, they must have been really stoked. There's some really particularly dashing Ian sartorial choices in these last few episodes that I'm a big fan of. I mean, he's got a borderline Austin Powers thing going on here.
The doctor and Susan are still...
What? Susan! Susan, child! Susan, wake up! Wake up, quickly! Get some cloths and cups.
All right,
Look, we must have some water. We mustn't waste a drop. Come along, child, wake up. Quickly. Look at it streaming down the walls. Look. We must collect this water.
Water!
We must, quickly. Before she beat up in the sun. Hurry, child! Hurry, please!
Particularly hysterical Hartnell here. See on you, TARDIS has got water. Come on.
The inside stayed warm, and so moisture formed on the inside.
Educational.
It's condensation. We just call it that. It's just a name.
It was running down
Look
the
at
walls.
Hartnell's face there.
We took it in this. We squeezed it in here, you see?
You understand now? I have seen this happen.
They left. And then when I prepared to leave for you, I saw your caravan coming across the desert towards me.
Yeah, whatever, mate.
They've not discovered water. You might have been too late to save us, Mr. Gunn.
And are these bandits likely to return?
No.
These bandits.
Saying they were going to ride for Karakoram.
Bit of sass from Barbara there.
That used to be to the north on the Great Steppe. Marco's worried about bandits.
Oh, rubbish.
Tigana said there were some here last night. If they were very clean about it.
What do you mean?
Look, last night was very cold, but there's no sign of a fire having been lit.
Perhaps they didn't want anyone to know they'd been here.
She is very much the brains of the operation. It's kind of like the Doctor is, he's library smart, but Barbara, she's street smart.
Yes, that may be. But I think Tigana just used the bandits as an excuse for not coming back to us with water.
Maybe. Well, the thing to do is to ask Tigana.
Seems reasonable.
Ask Tigana what?
I was adamant, despite the doctor's protests, that the key and his caravan should be handed over to me.
The thing that's interesting about this device of the narration is that it centralizes the point of view as being Marco's. So this feels very much like the Doctor and the companions are coming into his story, which is really interesting at this point, because I've talked about how we do spend a lot of time in these stories with the guest actors, and it seems like a logical extension of that to actually have it being almost completely from their perspectives, and we're invading Marco's story. And I like that. I think that's a really interesting approach to take. And you see that in later episodes of television. Like the Zeppo, the episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, famously does that. And I believe there's an episode of is it the David Tennant era Doctor Who, where I think it's from somebody else's perspective, and the Doctor and his companion just come in as kind of cameo characters. They invade that person's storyline. I've got a vague recollection of that as well. So it is interesting to see that perspective here.
Now we journey on across this burning desert.
That's a great image. It's going to be my thumbnail. You wait and see. It's just so cruel and ironic that the most visually sumptuous episode is the first one to not be available visually. It's, you know, it almost feels like the two-parter that's just been on. That wouldn't have been as much of a loss because it was such a static environment. There's just a lot of extras in this as well. And I also think that I love the fact that this was recorded by a fan, and I could be wrong, but I'm guessing just a little, you know, jinky tape recorder held up to the television. I used to do that when I was a kid before we had video. And who would have known that silly thing that some kid probably did would cascade throughout history now and be seen by thousands of people and really be the basis of the only surviving member. The kind of inadvertent act of preservation that was done there is that's just fascinating to me, and just such a wonderful piece of fandom.
They were the Hashashins.
Hashashins?
Yes, and they were so called because they used the drug hashish.
Understood Hashashins?
Ooh, very topical for the 60s.
You've given Marco Polo the key.
A key, my boy, a key. What use do you think it's going to be to him? And where do you suppose I got that from, huh?
No idea.
I made it.
Made it when?
On the night at the Oasis. The only chance I had. She knows all about it, don't you, Susan?
Crafty old fox.
Grandfather,
Yes?
what do you know about the Hashashins?
Now let me think. Yes, there was some kind of set about.
Well, Bing Jo knows the story and she's going to tell us about it.
Oh, how delightful. Yes, why not?
I love it when they're enjoying themselves.
Ian?
This is very travelogish. I mentioned before about, you know, the Bond movies, and people didn't get to go abroad, really, you know. It's certainly not working class people.
Gracious maidens, gentle lords, pray attend me while I tell my tale.
So it's an opportunity to enjoy other cultures and
who by
history.
devious schemes, evil designs and foul murders rule the land. No host of arms, no vast array of banners served this wicked lord. There were but few, ruthless, reckless men.
It's nice to see the Doctor and Susan sort of being affectionate to each other and actually familial, you know.
He gave his followers a potent draught, sleeping to his
This is quite an impressive piece of performance acting. Again, when you consider the live production method.
Seek out my enemies and strike them down.
Thank you, Pincher.
Charming, charming.
Yeah, see, Barbara's got a good bullshit detector.
The word hashashin in English today?
No?
Yes, assassins.
Assassin.
Yes.
Oh.
Bing Jo, is the word
You see, we talk about, this is a damning indictment of my level of education, but I've mentioned before about how, you know, we talk about the educational value of Doctor Who, and, you know, I have learned a few things watching this show. Take that early 1980s high school education. This is what I needed all along. I should have just been watching Doctor Who.
Alaya didn't hear? No, Susan, it was a...
Some of Aladdin's followers lived near here, in the cave of 500 eyes.
He said the thing. It's a great mythic feel to this episode. Hidden chambers. Okay, now we're getting into real adventure storytelling. Arabian Nights kind of storytelling.
He has formed his army.
Yes. That is why you must capture it. You will attack our caravan as we're going to...
Oh, it's got an ambush. They're coming.
to deliver it.
Get one.
I can't tell from the picture, but I think there's some slightly problematic casting going on with some of these characters. But again, 1964. Come on, what do you want?
In the outer cave. Now.
Oh, Barbara, you're going to get yourself in some trouble here.
Don't worry, Charles. We'll find her. Don't worry.
Wow, that's some playing dice to decide who will kill her. That's some definitely some caddish behaviour.
Mr. Marco will be angry. He told us to stay here.
Never mind about him. Which road? The road goes
Grandfather,
south.
you'll never find it on your own. Come on.
It's all right if you insist. Then come along, both of you. Quickly.
It's nice to see the Doctor taking charge of the situation and, you know, being a protagonist again after being somewhat infirmed in a lot of the most recent episodes, with Ian taking charge or our attention shifting to the sort of secondary guest characters. It's good to see him kind of making decisions and pushing the action forward again.
Not at night. You will not come back alive.
Creepy. The next episode, The Wall of Lies. Okay, that was interesting, that one, for a couple of reasons. This one seemed to have a lot more still photographs to draw on than the previous episode, than the second episode. So that made this a lot more engaging and a lot less storybook. Also, there was a real strong sense of adventure in this episode, you know, with chambers and catacombs, and, you know, it almost feels like, you know, Doc Savage or King Solomon's Mines, you know, like a Haggard novel, or and what would obviously become, you know, the Indiana Jones films. It feels very much like it's in that world. And again, the travelogue element, that sort of like protracted sequence in a moment where in the middle where we get to just spend time with the culture. And I think that must have been tremendously appealing at the time, because in the same way that we look for science fiction for escapism back in the 1960s, where, you know, lives were much more provincial, the idea of just exoticism must have been very alluring. And I think this episode has that as well. So there are moments in this episode, I think, to certain modern sensibilities would feel slow, but in the same way that, you know, the James Bond movies would slow down to show you a scene of a belly dancer or something, you know, you can just sort of soak that up. You can soak up the culture, soak up the history, soak up the sightseeing. And I like the fact that the episodes take the time to do that as well. So yeah, very enjoyable stuff. I'm looking forward to getting to the next episode, the fourth part, getting through this really quickly. Appreciate feedback, so please do leave comments on the YouTube channel. Check out the Rewatch Project with Hannah and Mike, the audio podcast that's on this feed as well. That's also available as a regular podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and anywhere that you might get regular podcasts. So please check that out, and I'll be back with you in the next couple of days to continue watching classic Doctor Who, which I am enjoying tremendously. Back soon.